Good evening, dear viewers of Smart 24 TV. This is a good Wednesday. We have a blessed guest with us, and it's a pleasure to be with you, Dr. Henry Clark Kisembo, the CEO of Dali, Uganda, and we appreciate for your expertise, especially in issues of the economy and the financial inclusion. We appreciate all that you've been doing across the globe in doing this good work that you will briefly share with the viewers. My name is Dr. Joseph Tindieba, and we'll be having this time the point analyzing the economic policies of the country. And our concentration is what is happening outside there, looking at how we can resolve the increased inflation question. We don't have the power, but we have a positive mind. That is our power. And we believe that if we can have this discussion, it can address a number of gaps in the midst where economists and policymakers seem to be giving a direction. And it's a pleasure to have you, please, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tindieba, and it's always a pleasure being here at Smart 24 Television, and also to all those who are always awaiting when they know that I'm going to be on air. It's always a pleasure having you and all those who are locked into Smart 24. So thank you so much. It's an honor being here once again. Like you introduced me, I'm Dr. Henry Clark Kisembo. I am the Chief Managing Partner Global of DALI, Development Associates Link International. So it's a global company which works in 76 countries, 5 continents, and we are into consulting, project management, and investment firm. So I've spent the last 20 years in practice of advice and structuring financial markets across the globe, on the Wall Street, in the stock markets, in the economies of different countries, but also structuring pathways with the central banks and the regulators, but also working with business communities to see how they can overcome the different challenges, especially those that are driven by financial economics, and they are hinged on financial inclusion. So that has been a lot of my work, but I'm also in academia. I lecture at the University of Chicago in the US, but also at Uganda Management Institute, amongst others.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Continue serving humanity, and thank you for coming to serve.
Thank you so much.
And in the academia, we say that's equal to community service.
Yeah.
Our dear viewers, we will have this question for discussion, and we look at, can the fiscal policy reforms stabilize the money economy and inflation in Uganda? We will unearth and the number of reforms possibly, that's part of the area which you are covered with, and both dealing with the micro and the macro economics, and these reforms, whether they have anything they can either bring a redress, cause a redress to the increased inflation. The latest information which is being shared in the social media, and basically the hard copy, the newspaper, it shows that inflation is pushing prices of commodities higher. That's one of the media publication paper of FAST. And also, it's since the end of the month, it was realized that we were in a single digit, and now we are in a double digit. Politicians address it differently. Some politicians say it is a global economic crisis, but then policy analysts have it in a different shape. But Ugandans want to know, would like to know, what exactly is happening? How can we resolve such paradox? Who are the people to help us? The technocrats. Now having you here is a pleasure to have you. And please, kindly give us
thank you so much. I'll keep it as simple as possible, because in most cases the audience who are watching us and who are listening to us on all their different channels may not really wish to know much about the jargons that we use when we meet as academia or when we meet as technocrats, but to make it simple for them. So now let's pick it from inflation from single digit to double digit. And I'm sure that you're talking about the recent raise to 10%, and probably now it's at 10.7%. And you realize that for the last about 4 months, it has been on an up curve. Inflation has been on the rise by about, let's say, if in the last 5 months, that is May, it was about 5.2, and now it is 10.7. That has a lot to communicate. But also it is hinged on a number of factors. Because inflation per se, let us first understand what is inflation.
Yes, sir.
Inflation is whereby the value of money and disposable income that you place into the economy or that you can use in the purchase of goods loses its value. You find that losing its value, that if you used to get 2 bananas for 1,000 shillings or maybe a cent, now you're going to get 1 banana for the same 1,000 shillings. Now that is as simple as it is, that your money has actually lost value. That the money you used to get more items, now you're getting lesser items. So what could be the cause of that? For example, transport. A trip from, say, Ginger Road, let's say Senari Park to Boyogerere, if it was, say, 2,000 shillings, it now goes to 4,000. That is already a sign that there is may not be a crisis, but there's a problem. So that is in simple terms what inflation means. The increase of prices of goods, and they tend to devalue the currency or the money and the disposable income available. Now when you talk about reforms, and also relating them to the fiscal policy, and the question at hand is resolving the inflation question, which means that the public wants to know what are all these causes of these prices going up. And of course, me as a practitioner, but also an analyst and a financial economist, I'll just say that inflation does not wake up one day and then it drops and say that there's inflation. It has roots. It has roots, meaning that it has been a trend happening, but a trend which has not been significant. But at a certain point, it explodes, you know. So, for instance, if fuel, because it's one of the most pinching item or commodity, we can say, increases from, say, 3,000 to 7,000 a liter, that's when people start realizing that there is something not right. But you see, in most cases, there are categories of people. There is a class which will go to shop in high-end supermarkets, and for them, they don't know what's happening in the downtown, like that people are surviving on 1,000 or 12,000 shillings. For them, going into a supermarket and spending 500,000 shillings is just not a problem to them. But it becomes a problem when they go to the gas station and they realize that actually the fuel that they used to get for that 500,000 can no longer take them the distance. So you see it affects now both people, that the prices of food go up in the local markets, but also the fuel that these high-end people, the rich ones, who drive the four-wheel drives, are realizing that fuel can no longer get them as far as they can. So where do we put it all? Or where would one start? That Uganda as a nation, let's take it for the last one generation, 40 years, has it been in a position to plan to proactively address issues of economic recession, of inflation, of breakdown of pandemics like COVID? I would say that not really. Uganda has been a country that has been riding mostly on a hybrid of policies and systems which are mainly adopted from the West. Take for example the structural adjustment programs, which came, everybody talked about the structural adjustment programs, privatize government corporations which are inefficient, they are not performing, and then once you privatize, they'll get into the hands of the private sector, they'll be made to be more efficient, they'll create more jobs, they'll increase production. What happened to the structural adjustment programs? Today, we see that all the corporations, mostly that fell in the private sector hands, either became redundant or were even mismanaged, or were so heavy to be maintained by the private sector. Because the private sector is more of demand, supply, profit. But the government at least can run corporations based on subsidies, which means that it serves everybody. Now, the moment you go into structured adjustment programs, you've started excluding certain people from the marketplace, from being able to consume certain products and services. So whoever recommended the structural adjustment programs, personally, I think that Africa was a guinea pig, a pilot project for the West, maybe the World Bank, IFC, but it was never going to work in Africa because that was not the problem. The problem was emanating, especially for Uganda, from the multiple wars that had happened. That from independence, Uganda had undergone how many shifts of government? You talk of Mutesa one, talk of Bote, first regime, Idi Amin, talk about a number of presidents who came in there. Instability just, talk about the Asian community that was chased away from the country. So how do structural adjustment programs solve issues which are more of societal and more of political? They just can't. Because inflation is based on finance and economics. You see, it's based on production and consumption. You must enhance production, and then you must also create an enabling environment for people to be able to earn. When they earn, they are able to consume. When they consume, production increases. So you see, you strike a balance. But who does the production? The production in Uganda is predominantly agrarian. Let alone this whole talk about oil and gas, which has been from 2011, everybody is talking about oil and gas. I think we shall get to 2025 before we see the real oil. But I know that some crude is being released. But of course, it has been ups and downs. Let's talk about the agrarian, the agriculture. It has been more of subsistence. Which economy ever grew on subsistence agriculture? None. Countries that we were with in 1962 at the same level, yeah, the Asian tigers, right now, they are global first world powers. We are still here borrowing in high debt. So where is the problem in around inflation? The problem is the inability to plan as a country.
That's part of the root cause.
That's part of the root cause. Inability to plan or poor planning. Because when you're planning, you always have buffers.
Yes.
Has Uganda got any food buffer?
No.
Any you've heard of?
No.
No.
We don't have service.
Has Uganda got some fuel reserves that if there is a fuel crisis, they'll go to some tankers somewhere which have reserves, and then they'll bring the reserves to the people? You find that they are not there. When you go to medical stores, you'll either find expired drugs or drugs which are not sufficient to even serve the population. That goes back to planning. Who is planning for the country? I mean, is it some people who went, got degrees and then ended up with some jobs and are using theory in the books to be able to plan for a country? Or is it a blend of practitioners, people who have been in real practice of how economies run, plus academia coming together?
We seem to be having the National Planning Authority for Uganda, and it has been around since the last around 15 years, because we have the third development plan. And that's the number one commentary as you come in again, maybe to give some clarification or your take on that. The number two, we have the Bank of Uganda, which is in charge of this number of, the key fiscal policies that can stabilize the money economy and basically the matters related with the fiscal policies. To us, we thought, and maybe to you give us where we are missing a point. All of this would have led us to have a clear direction in terms of better planning processes. And incidentally, 2012, the late Governor Bank of Uganda, may his soul rest in eternal peace. That's Professor Mutebire.
Yes.
He articulated, he said when he came up with the outright statement, he said the cause of inflation that we're facing by that time was as a result of government spending much more on public expenditure. How can we now merge into an understanding that maybe bridges this gap of poor planning, yet technocrats seem to have tried to advise the government and have tried to come up with what is either substantive or comprehensive plans, including the National Development Plan.
You see, let me start from the late. I liked the late Professor Mutebiri a lot, and may his soul rest in peace. He is that one man who stood by his word and stood by his professional ethics, and he told what it is in black and white. When he says that the problem of inflation at that time, which causes a recession, is caused by public expenditure, you realize that he was 100% correct. Why was he 100% correct? Just to touch a little bit of history, and I know you were there. At a certain time during this regime of government, there was a time when ministers used to ride in cars called laurels. Remember laurels? All ministers had that saloon car. And we all thought that now we've gotten more of a low public expenditure budget kind of intervention. Today, if a senior officer is not driving in a four-wheel drive, then they are not serving. They don't seem to be serving. But do they need those four-wheel drives which take a lot of fuel?
So you will hold on and we'll continue from there in the next hour. Please stay tuned. This is information you cannot miss. And the analytical point of view is quite addressing a number of the realities that we face, so that if we are keen enough, we're able to come out from that and streamline ourselves to be able to manage, not to be managed. Thank you.